Good morning and welcome back to Planet Althistory. Today we are going to discuss what if India became Christian. Believe it or not, Christianity has a long history in India. It has a very unique history as well. Christianity exists there for over 1900 years. But Christians themselves only constitute a small percentage of the Indian population. I believe it is about 2 to 3%, with some varieties among the Indian states, but still, if we calculate 2-3% of a billion, it's still a lot. There are two important churches in India. The Catholic Church, which came with the Portuguese, and then also the St. Thomas denomination, and the believers are known under different names such as Nasrani or Syrian Christians of India. Thomas the Apostle is believed to have been around 52 AD on Kerala, which is in southern India. Kerala was home to the so-called Cochin Jews, which were already there in the 1st century AD. And thus it was possible for someone like Thomas to convert people in there and to, of course, travel in there and even to speak Aramaic. There are various claims of numerous Roman writers who said that they saw Jews or Christians holding a mass in the Hebrew language in the 2nd or 3rd century in India, of course. But who did Thomas convert at the end? Well, it is believed that Thomas converted some Brahmin families. But as we know, the Brahmin families, they were already on the top of the caste system. And for many lower classes, the main appeal of Christianity was that it seemed more classless in a way. The priests always spoke how human beings are created in the image of the likeness of God, how everyone had to share with each other. There was a sense of community, and this was still a very important point until nowadays. Believers were not only believers but also brothers and sisters. As a result, the conversion of the high caste families was not only illogical, but it harmed the spread of Christianity in India. Let's also not forget that India had constant exchange with Arabia, Egypt, and even the Mediterranean. So in paper, the spread of Christianity paired with a seemingly unfair caste system could potentially have happened. So what if all of that changed? What if India became Christian? Our main point of divergence is a fairly easy one. Thomas the Apostle would arrive in India. Once he arrives in there, he would hear about the so-called untouchables. Well, while slavery was still normal in those years, until very long, until maybe 100 years ago, it didn't necessarily mean that you could just abuse your slave. Roman laws were in place, and also other societies had very good protections. There were also slaves that had a high esteem in society, such as Greek tutors, for instance. Or there were also slaves who knew how to do certain jobs. And also, even though some slaves were slaves of the enemies, but at least they were slaves who fought against and who tried to defend themselves in a brave way against the Romans. So maybe there was some type of respect in there. Hearing about these untouchables, Thomas the Apostle inquired about these people, and he would try to find them, because he was like, untouchable, that is really unbelievable. Christianity in the beginning was a religion of the oppressed, and I believe that the untouchables and lower castes could find an appeal to it. They wouldn't need to pay so much for sacrifices anymore, and there would be a community to help the poorest even. They would hear about the life of Jesus, the apostles, how God created everyone according to his image, and some of the lower classes would actually believe that this could be it. Is there finally a way how we can take our own destiny, how we can choose something and have some freedom? sure, there would be still a question about leading a good life and going to heaven, and yes, Christianity is still very, very extreme in some ways, but otherwise, you know, if you have the choice between Christianity, where you still have a room for freedom, and the caste system, the choice is easily done, I think. It is true that some of the caste system will stay somehow, but as for now, the Christians in India would be largely seen as lower classes. However, after 200, 300 years, probably a smaller king or prince could be converted successfully to Christianity. Why? Well, if we are looking back in the history, Ethiopia and Armenia converted that way. And one might also say that Rome in a way did so, but only in there it was because of Constantine, who already was raised by a Christian mother. But if he would not have been raised by a Christian mother, it's probably still very likely that another person would be forced to convert to Christianity. And I mean, if we look at the Christian countries, well, they had really, really a lot of missionary work that came in there in the courts, and these guys were impossible. They were really, they did a lot of adventures, they did so many things, so why not have a successful Christian missionary go in India? Well, then we have a Christian majority in the south of India, around Kerala, but also in the lands of the Tamils, for instance. Madurai especially had many Roman merchants, so that would not be impossible that the close contact with the Romans, and many of them who would be Christian already, would have a good effect on the spread of Christianity. Many people forget that Hinduism didn't really spread until much later in southern India. So with more competition from Christianity and some similarities of Buddhism, Christianity could have the upper hand. And with more courts converting to Christianity and keeping contacts with Christian lands, the southern kingdoms of India would certainly become Christian. What does this mean? The caste system would not change overnight, but there would be some social changes and transformations, and more people would be able to join the armies, and this would give the southern Indian kingdoms the upper hand. One of these kingdoms might even gain most of the lands, and we could see something similar as with the rise of the Gupta in the north of India. Gupta compete with an albeit similar rival empire, but in terms of military power, this smaller empire in the south would have the edge not only with their manpower but also with their navy, because Gupta was mainly a land empire, while the southern Indian kingdom could, due to the trade that happened, well, have a big navy. Sri Lanka could easily fall into the sphere of influence of the southern Indian kingdom, and Gupta may even lose more lands to their new Christian rival. In terms of knowledge, science and philosophy, not only would India see with Gupta the golden age, but in the south there would also be centers of education, philosophy and whatnot. And the Indian golden age could even become greater than in OGL. And we might see something akin to a university not only in Gupta, but also in the south. Remember how the Irish monks, they spread Christianity and reconverted the Germanic pagans. Many of these monks were truly courageous and would literally die in the name of God. I mean, we cannot even understand why they did all of this. It's because they really believed in God and all of these things of Christianity. With a Christian southern Indian kingdom empire, many parts of Indochina, Indonesia and even China themselves would become Christian. We would not only see Nestorians in China, but they would also have a minority called maybe the Thomasites. The rulers of this empire, of the southern Indian empire, would probably also make some councils and whatnot, as almost all the Christian empires and kingdoms did in the beginning, and no Rome or the Pope would have power in there. However, and here the caste system will come back again, the priests, while officially they would not be better than the rest of the population, they would still be very much respected. And most priests would even be idols to the commoners or to the community which they would represent. The priest would not necessarily look down at commoners, but it would be understood that they are in a higher place in society than, let's say, a farmer, for instance. Around 550, when the Huns invaded India, especially the Gupta Empire, I believe that this could be another point where many people in India would decide to convert to Christianity due to the horror and other things that would happen. Gupta collapsed into many different smaller kingdoms, principalities, and even something called the tribal republics. Having a priest as leader with some believers would give the priest power to negotiate in the name of this small Christian community, and thus many non-believers, they would also convert, and you would see the priest becoming very important and skilled statesman of these former territories of Gupta. The southern Indian kingdom could decide to strike and take what would be left of Gupta. Much of southern, central, eastern India would be under this empire, while the north and the west, they would be temporarily be ruled by some successor state who would also fall one by one under the influence of this Christian empire. Society in India would be vastly different than most gods that are known today. They would be reinterpreted as saints, and many legends from other Christian kingdoms, they would be readapted to appeal to the Indians, while Indian legends, they would spread to the former Rome or other Christian parts which would rely on Indian support. Tradition and culture would change too, due to the fact that India would become less hierarchical as society, but the caste system would still be in one way or another present, although in a less extreme way than in OTL, and also maybe not officially, but more like unofficially. With the arrival of the Umayyad Caliphate, the Indian Christian kingdom would certainly get into conflict with them and lose some wars, and experiencing the first heavy losses and defeats. This would certainly destabilize the empire, and it would be seen as punishment of gods. Internal trouble might follow, and some parts would be occupied by the Muslims. The Christians would have it easier than the Buddhists or Hindus, and it is possible that some Buddhist monks and monasteries, they would then convert to Christianity, as they would then otherwise face destruction. And also because in Islam, monasticism was heavily criticized, while Christianity was relatively open to it. In the following centuries of this alternate 9th century and 10th century, the Muslims would still get internal problems, and we might see something similar as the Reconquista happen in the areas around of Pakistan or the Indus River. But I feel that this Reconquista would be much shorter in time than the Iberian Reconquista. The Western Indians would be repelled from further invasions into Persia, but could potentially venture a bit in modern-day Oman or Yemen and pose serious threats to the Muslims in there, and with that the fall of the Abbasids could maybe happen much faster. The Safavids would control a much smaller portion of Persia and be in constant war with Western India. While Western India, due to the Buddhists and even Hindu monks converting to Christianity, would have theological differences with the rest of India, and also have a few wars with them, of course. Because any theological difference, well, it means war. Culturally, this would be also an important marked divide between Western India and the rest of India in there. And also note that in Rajasthan, which is a good place which we could take as border, well, it's a desert, so this is also a very good natural border for these areas of cultural sphere of influence. During the Crusades, most of the support from India, if at all, would come from the fanatic Western Indians, who, due to the constant conflicts with the Muslims and the theological differences from the rest of India, would try to win over some Christian allies, such as Byzantium, France, or even the Pope, but it would not really result into something deeper, as they would just be too far away and have different political realities. The Mongols would still appear and much of Western India would fall into their rule, of course. While the rest of India would be able to still do their own things, and we would see powerful empires emerging. These empires would be more tolerant due to the trade that they would do, and we could see their influence reach places as Indochina, Sri Lanka, East Africa, which would strengthen a little bit the Ethiopians, even Oman or Yemen, Indonesia, and perhaps the Philippines too. The Ghaznavids and Ghurid Empire, they would also not exist, and because of the much stronger Indian states, there would also not be any Islamization in there, like in Bengal for instance. Islam, if at all, would only exist in Western India or in places open to Muslim merchants. But these Muslims, they would always pose a very, very small minority. This also means that Indonesia may not become Muslim in majority, for instance. The Mongols would still not change that much, except that there won't be a Mughal empire, and at one point the only Mongol-ruled place in India would still become similar to Western India. It is, however, very possible that the caste system would now be completely abolished and that this new Western India would be able to conquer a lot of India, but not all immediately at once. Remember, this India is less balkanized than in OTL. While Western India may be more fanatic, they would be able to change and adapt due to the many invasions they suffered. While the rest of India would be vulnerable, and around the 1500s, much of India would belong to this fanatic Western Indian kingdom, becoming the empire of all India. Trade would be done with the Portuguese, and perhaps even an alliance of convenience would be established between the two Christian states, and they would try to ensure safe passage for Christian ships from Europe, Africa, India and China. This means that Portugal would not be that able to have power over Indian and Chinese trade, and so a bigger focus on Africa earlier on may be possible, and even in Brazil. What are the consequences of this? I cannot tell you, as it is already too far to reach. From here on, it is difficult to say what could happen next, but I predict that India would suffer some type of civil war or Christian civil war between different factions. The Portuguese could support the side and some other European powers as well, but eventually, just as in Europe, peace between the fanatic Indian church and the Thomasite church would happen. India would not be colonized, and Indochina, Indonesia and even the Philippines could be included into this Indian civilization. Christian, yes, but different from the Western civilization, and also different from the Orthodox civilization or Russian civilization. Within India, we would see a few differences, mostly between the rest and the West. While the West would define themselves as Christian defenders with a Buddhist touch, although they would deny it a little bit, the rest of India would see religion as less important, and might see a more capitalistic and mercantile population around the coast, for instance. And if India remains united, it may become a big world power, just like Japan, and project power in Eastern Africa, even Ethiopia, and be seen as protector of Eastern African Christians and Arab Christians, even maybe Chinese Christians, or Christians that are spread everywhere, but where they are the closest and not European powers. And that's where we leave it for now.
That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed my video. Be sure to like and subscribe, leave a comment, support me also on Patreon, and join my forum, forum.planetalthistory.ga. Until next time on Planet Alt History.